Yo, what up? This is Chris from ForMeRiver.com and CustomRiverTables.com. I'm in the middle of making this river table here, and I wanted to kind of go over some of my, just kind of the way that I do it, and sometimes when I want to save some money when the client doesn't have enough money for me to build a full form and I really don't need it, and just a couple of ways that I do it, different methods, and how I mix the epoxy and the whole 9 yards. So I've already done a little bit of work here. I planed both of these and sanded them, cut them down square, and then built the melamine frame with the Tyvek style tape over the whole entire thing, silicone, and then on these edges here, so that I don't lose a lot of my epoxy underneath. So then I have a whole big planing job on the bottom, and it's just, sometimes it gets to be a nightmare, especially the more rotted the wood is. So I got some UV resin and a little UV curing light, a little black light there, and I went through all of these little edges right here and gummed it up. And the reason I'm doing that is, like I said, I don't want it to go underneath. This client actually has asked for a metallic halfway and clear the rest of the way, so you can still see a little bit of depth but still have that metallic. So you're not going to see through the metallic pigments, so anything that I do here is going to save me time later, and you won't see it anyway because it's probably going to be planed off, or it's going to be on the bottom anyway. So I do this a lot when I really don't want the mess on some of the wood that I get is really rotted on both sides, and unless I really want it to go underneath and soak the whole entire thing, I try to keep it contained right in here because this stuff is expensive, and any that goes out or any potential leaks it kills you, right from the get-go. So anyways, planed and sanded my slabs, measured out what I wanted, cut them square, and threw them in here. Used silicone on the mold edges here, and when I silicone, I also silicone the little edges here along the sides so that none will go out there. I also silicone the edges here the same way, so that none will seep through this way. So as long as you have a good seal on the bottom, and as long as they're on the edges, you should be good. Let me grab the camera and I'll show you exactly what I've done. Let's see. Alright. So here, along these sides right here, this has silicone, and this has silicone. And then once that dried, and I did my my UV resin, which you can probably see right there, the edge, along that whole entire edge, so that I could make sure everything's sealed, it's not going to go underneath. We did that along the whole entire thing, and again there's silicone there, and then later I went back and put the epoxy over it, the UV epoxy, and let it harden really quick. For some of these little holes I use the UV epoxy because it just is so quick, and I mean you can see it's crystal clear. So as long as you're not really going too thick with that UV epoxy, that's a really quick way to fill these holes. And it doesn't have to be perfect because I'm going to do a top coat on this anyway. So that's basically what I've done here. Is I've got a sheet of melamine, and sometimes, if you have old pieces, like I had some old pieces of MDF for this, and instead of cutting a brand new piece of melamine over there, I can just use the one piece of melamine here and reuse this by just putting the tape on it, because this tape, as long as you get it on there and it seals good, it won't seep through. So, and then let's see, so today what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go ahead and I'm going to mix the metallics. I'm going to pour, and I'm going to actually use the top coat that PourMeARiver.com sells, because it'll harden for me a lot quicker than the deep pour. I am going to use the deep pour on this, but what I want to do is, just in case I miss any spots with the UV resin, if there's any spot that might leak, the deep pour resin is a lot less viscosity, so it's more like water. It will if there's a little hole, it'll find it and it will leak, and you know, it's costly when it leaks. So the main thing here for me is I'm pouring a lot. I don't want it to leak, so I'm going to use the top coat, and I'm just going to pour, you know, maybe 1/8 of an inch, 1/4 of an inch inside here, and it's wide enough that it shouldn't have a heat reaction to get too hot. Or anything like that, as long as I get all the bubbles out. But it's got metallics in it, so a lot of that's going to be hidden in the metallic if there was any kind of mistake other than a bubble at the top. So I'm going to put that layer down, and I'm not really worried that you know, I'm going to be putting that small layer and then the next layer up will be a full deep pour, because when I pop this out of the mold, I'm going to plane the bottom anyway. So what I'm pouring right now, the majority of it will probably be planed off at the end of the day anyways. This is really just for me to seal it. If it seals good, then I save money just by using a little bit of this to get it nice and sealed. If I didn't use this and there was another pinhole, you could take a shot, and I do that sometimes, and you don't have to do this step. But I'm doing this step because it's the first time I've actually used this kind of UV resin, and this did have some really kind of crazy little lift up areas over here where there was some rot. So I just wanted to make sure that if something does seep through, it's the thicker epoxy that will harden quicker, so it won't seep overnight. With the deep pour, it takes 3 days to cure, so it has 3 days to find a hole and leak out. And if there's a hole, I guarantee you it'll find it. But let's go ahead, and I'll go ahead and show you how I mix this, and it's really easy. Alright, I'm going to use a drill mix on this, and I'm going to use some eye candy Okinawa blue. This is a really, really cool color. It always gives great results. So, using PourMeARiver.com top coat to do a seal coat. You always want to pour part B first, just because it's not as thick as part A, the epoxy. This is the hardener, and it won't coat the inside as thick. You don't want a really thick coat of this and then pouring this in. It's just a lot more mixing later. So if you just make sure you pour this first, you should be good. And I am going to go ahead and I'm going to do exact half. Alright. And we'll go part A. Perfect. And okay. This is for scraping the sides later. Make sure you, hey, pro tip, always hold on to this because this thing will spin off and get you. So we'll mix it for like probably 2 minutes, or until it's totally clear and there's no swirls. It's got to look like clear, crystal clear water, and you got to scrape the edges a lot. It's okay if bubbles get in this. You want to try to minimize them as much as you can, so you're not going to go super high speed with the drill, but you know, at the same time, it's okay if a few bubbles get in there because they will be released. remember, if you're pouring this in a really hot summer day and it's over 90 degrees, this stuff will harden very, very fast. Temperature plays a big role in how fast this epoxy sets up and how easy it is to work with. As long as you stay within 75 to 85 degrees, you should be good. But you know, you get up there in the 90, 95, you get some unwanted results some of the time. So temperature plays a big role. The hotter it is, the quicker this stuff's going to set up. Alright, that looks pretty good. I am going to place a couple of these on the floor so that I can put this on it. When I'm done. Okay, now I'm going to put a little pigment in there, and for this, you know, it's just the bottom coat, so I just kind of want it to match what I'm going to be doing. On the top. I don't have to waste a lot of pigment, and a lot of this pigment, a little bit goes a long way. So, okay, I'll let that drip for a second. Alright, now there's just a couple bubbles on there, but that's going to be okay because those are already at the top. We're going to go ahead and scrape the sides really good. And then just give it another good mix. Alright. And if you put that stick on plastic later, you can peel it back up and use it again, as long as you scraped it off. I always like to take off one glove, so I'm working here like this. And now I'm just going to go ahead and pour it, because we don't have much time now that it's all mixed. So that's pretty evenly spread on there, which is really good. Again, this is just a sealer coat. You're not going to see through the end result on this, so I really just wanted to give it the same hue so that it didn't look odd from the sides on the end here. But again, there's a good chance that you know, a lot of this will be planed off from the bottom side anyway when we make our bottom side perfect. Alright, that's about it. Let's take you around. After this, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take some heat to it with the torch here. and we'll get some of these bubbles out. Go ahead and do that. Alright, that's about it. I'll let that set for about 12 hours. I'll come back before it gets too hard, before it fully cures, so I don't have to sand it again. And then I'll do my deep pour on top of this, and I'll go halfway with the metallic, and then we'll do the clear pour on the top, and we'll follow this along for the rest of the way. Okay, so we're back, and we're going to, it's been 24 hours, and the bottom seal coat that I did has now hardened, and I'm already mixing and pouring the deep pours. I'm not going to do it in the 5-gallon bucket. I'm not a huge fan of that. I've said that over and over in videos. I'm just going to use the one bucket and do it over and over, because I'm only going to go a certain height, and I don't know how high that's going to be, so I don't want to waste epoxy. So we're just going to go ahead and finish mixing. I'm going to go ahead and put some color in this. I'm using Okinawa Blue from Eye Candy Pigments. I'm a huge fan of their stuff, even though I sell my own. They're just awesome pigments. So from here I'm probably going to speed this up and do this until it's full, and then I'll show you the next steps. Okay, so we poured everything up to the spot where I kind of want this before I actually fill it with the clear. Like I said, this is a 3-to-1 deep pour, so I mean, as you can see, it's like water. You know, if I bump the table, it wiggles. The metallics that you have in there are going to sink to the bottom. You can stir it all you want, but because it's like water, that's how you're going to get no bubbles in it. So, also being because it's water, that's how these are not going to stay like this. So you could stir it in there like this all you want, but you're going to come back in about 2 hours and it's just going to be, it's not going to look like this. So what you do is you come back tomorrow, about 12 to 18 hours later, and you stir it one more time and then take the torch to tame it down. And I'll film all that so you guys can see, but just so you know, you can, if you want to play with it, you can play with it, but just keep in mind that whatever you do right there is kind of a waste of time. It's not going to really do anything. The only reason that I did it is to show you, but sometimes I do it just to make sure it's nice and stirred up, you know. So to get rid of the bubbles, we just take the torch. you dip it like that and you actually get it wet, just wipe it off. So it's been about, let's see, I waited about 12, 14 hours, came back in, and I didn't video it because it was the same process, just pouring the deep on top of the metallic for the clear up to the point where I needed it before I start my planing. So this is the end result of that. It is ready to be planed, which I'm going to do next. I'll probably do a high speed of that just to show you kind of like what, you know, my process and how I do it. But yeah, so I poured the first with the metallic, I let that harden up, and then I poured the clear on top and filled it up the rest of the way. So let's see what that looks like up close. So you can see I didn't go all the way to the top, but that's mainly because my slab is so thick. It's like 2 1/4 inches, and I don't want it that thick at the very end. But yeah, so next I'm going to go ahead actually and I'm going to remove the frame, and we're going to pop it out of the mold. You can see this corner had a whole big rot area, so I filled that so that that will be square when we pop this off. Yeah, so we'll do that next, and then move on to the next steps. Now I'm going to leave it yikes. I'm going to leave it down on the bottom part of the form because I'm just going to plane it right on here because I know that that's perfectly flat. I don't want to pop it up or anything like that. So I'll do any of my spacing underneath this between my table. That way there'll be no sag or anything like that, and I don't have to use a whole bunch of different spacers all over the place. So that's the next steps. Okay, I'll catch you up on what we've done now. I've filled it up to the top where I wanted it in the river. That was the last part. And then what I've done is this is fast forwarded ahead. After that, I planed it top and bottom. Got it nice and flat. I sanded it with 80, 120, and 180. And then this, what you're looking at, is my first top coat to seal it. And you know, when you do that top coat, you're going to get bubbles and imperfections and little porous parts that, you know, you didn't get perfectly filled, or a knot or a crack somewhere that's leaking air and it puts up a little bubbles. You just got to keep your eye on those, hit them with the torch a couple of times, and then if they're still bubbling, honestly, I just let them go because you know, you're ready for your next coat after this. So if you get any of those kind of bubbles on the top anywhere, you got to sand those down, and I usually go to like 180, 220. You really don't need to go higher than that because the epoxy is going to take care of it. If you want to go higher, you can. I don't personally. But if you have any of those spots, you can sand them down. If you were lucky enough to get the torch to make it so that it goes down, a downward type of a bubble where it didn't bubble back up, those are your best. Those little dimples are the best because then you can just go in with some super glue or some UV glue or even a fill stick really anything, just to fill those and get those clean without having to do a sand. And a lot of people do say, oh, you got to sand it for the mechanical bond. Look, I just poured this 12 hours ago. So it's, I mean, it's not tacky, but I can still put my fingernail into it just a little bit. You know, I mean, it's hard, but it's not fully cured yet. So I don't think I need to sand it. So I'm probably not going to sand it. I'm just going to go around. I'm going to make sure that all of my little holes here, anywhere I had any imperfections, using the light, you know, to see any little dimples that might not be filled, because this is going to be your, you know, you want to try to get this to be your last coat. So it all looks good. I think I'm just going to go ahead and get ready to pour. I'm going to use the top coat from pourmeariver.com. It has a hardness rating of D90, so it's really scratch resistant. And obviously it's super, super clear. I'm going to grab the camera and I'm going to come up close. So this is, and remember, this is just my sealer coat. This is not my final coat. I'm getting ready to do the final coat, and I'll video that and I'll show you how I did that. One other thing that I did do though, right after I planed it, I rounded off the edges with a router just to make it a little bit cleaner. And when people are sitting here, they don't want a sharp edge. So let me grab the camera. Let me show you up close. So you can see it's crystal clear. There's really probably only a couple little spots, like right here. I'll show you. See the little right there where my finger is? That how the light's hitting it? That's a small dimple. So we're going to have to dramatically change that by just filling that in a little bit. I'll probably use some super glue just really quick because it's easy and fast, or maybe some UV glue because it's actually instant, to make sure that that's actually sealed and that won't bubble on me again. I think if I use a fill stick here, the wood is so light, I don't have a light enough color to do that, and it would look odd if I filled it. So oh, and there's one right here. See the little dimple? You're going to get those in your first coat. I'm actually lucky that I didn't get more of them. Usually, oh, there's one right there. So I'll go in right now and I'll fill those with some like super glue, and we will get ready to do the next pour. Hopefully the final pour. And then we can go ahead and put it on its base, which this time is going to be a wooden base that we have right here. So let's see how that goes. Alright, I filled my little imperfections. I'm going to go ahead and pour my second layer. I'm going to take a small tack cloth first and we're going to wipe it off. Let's see here. This is good just to make sure that every little piece of dust is off of it. I've already mixed up my 1-to-1 tabletop epoxy from pourmeariver.com. So let's go ahead. That looks good. All right. Let's do this. I like to get a stick that I used, and I can put it into a puddle that I already have on there, just so I can mix it back in, because when you mix it back on here, it's going to get mixed again. So your hands are nice and clean. I like to wipe them off with a blue work towel. Works really good. Doesn't leave lint. That way I make sure I got anything from picking up the stick or anything like that is off. Now before it hits the edges, you just want to start. I don't use any kind of a trowel or 8-inch trowel like the Stone Coat guys, and that's really good on countertops and stuff, I guess. But when I'm doing this, I guess it's kind of like as a kid and you play with Play-Doh and you feel it, like it's, I can feel my high spots and my low spots and where the epoxy is and isn't. So as long as I do it evenly and mix it around, it usually gets on there really, really good and even. I don't wipe the sides yet. I do the top first because sometimes the sides, you don't want to have any debris on your hands. And when you're scraping those sides, if you didn't clean your table well enough, your work table, you will get debris on your top, and that's not what you want. So I'm just kind of making sure that everything is like evenly spread as much as I can. See, that was low right there, so I want to run that over like this. Sometimes you can pat like this and chop it. It doesn't matter. I always like to spread it first, then I'll start chopping. And then once you have a bunch accumulated on your hands, around the edges, I like to go like that, and then that just gets it really good on those corners and anywhere you have run over. You've got like 35-45 minute work time with the PourMeRiver.com top coat. But I mean, you can see it's crystal clear. It has great UV protection. They use HALS, which is one of the best UV stabilizers that you can use. So I know that this thing's going to last for a long time. Getting all those high spots out of there. Kind of a lot right there, so we'll pull it over here. That's good. That's good. You can use a trowel. I just don't, because I'm just so afraid that it's going to scratch and make problems, and I can feel it with my hands, and that, to me, that helps me make sure that I've gotten every spot that I needed to get. See, I'll wipe that like that, and it'll start to drain over. See it dripping over? That's really good. So once I'm confident that I have the top nice and covered and fairly even, I give it a look down, right? And now I'll start rubbing my edges. You'll notice some woods on your slabs, they will be a lot more absorbent, like they'll absorb more epoxy on the sides. So you really, really got to make sure that that gets coated really good. And you want it smooth. Rubbing it really, really good. Go back. Now hit this side. Right? And you can feel that it's got an even coat. You can feel it in your hands. Alright, just make sure that that's smooth. Make sure that that's nice and smooth. Oh yeah. And then just when you think you've rubbed them enough, rub them one more time. So go back around, because it's had time to drip, right? You see right there, I could feel that it wasn't coated really, really good. So I'll just keep rubbing that in. Get that excess off into one hand like that. Coat it. That feels way better. Alright, once you think you got it, if you're happy with it, go ahead. It's so hard to stop. Alright, so I'm going to call that. Set my dirty gloves out of the way. Get a work towel. Alright. Now, lightly torching. I'll probably do this 2 or 3 times. See any imperfections, like right here, I see a little something got in the epoxy. Go ahead and get it out now. And just lightly torch and I'll come right back. Try to, keep it as even as you can. But make sure that you hit everywhere. There's a little hair in there, so then I just tap it back. Just go slow. Let it move itself out again. Really just wanted to get that epoxy at an equal temperature so that it liquefies itself like water. See, got rid of that. That would have been horrible. Don't want to go too much because you will burn the epoxy. You just want to go light little bursts, because once you heat it up, it stays heated up and it starts to work. So you got to be careful about not overheating it. I like to turn it down just a little bit and finish it off. Always make sure that that clear, wherever your river is, just make sure that you really make sure that you get that. The last thing you want is a blemish in that, right? See, I got a little guy that was bubbling on me right there. That might give me an issue to the point where I might have to top coat this again. I hope not. We'll see. It looks like it's kind of dying down now. Nope, there he comes again. You don't want to keep, so here's one thing that you don't want to do. Even though you keep seeing that bubble, let that bubble go, man. There's ways towards the end where you can kind of like, you can kind of fix it. So I'm not too worried about that guy. I think I can fix him. He's just a small little guy and he's not continuing. So I think if I let it stiffen up a little bit and just kind of really work with it, I can get it back down. But now I'll leave this for 15 minutes and then I'll come back and I'll do one more full torch over the whole entire thing, and then I pretty much walk away after that and I leave it. So fingers crossed on this one.